This is the story of Greek slaves, psychological warfare, the modern world, and how I think it all fits together. I don't know how to start these things. The helots were originally the free inhabitants of Messenia and Laconia, which are two parts of Greece, until they were conquered by the Spartans and subjugated and turned into a sort of serf-like population. So essentially they were just this group of people. They were actually not just one ethnic group or one group, just a number of people around the area of the Spartan capital that were conquered by the Spartans and turned into slaves, which was very commonplace in the ancient world, because when one nation would go and attack another nation and take all their land, they would also keep their population as slaves, because there wasn't much point killing the new population when you could turn them into slaves, which would be labour. The helots were forced to work the land, agricultural work, all the things that the Spartans weren't willing to do, because the Spartans were very much a warrior. The Spartans were very much a warrior class. They didn't want to have to do any of that boring agricultural work, so they got the slaves from the conquered lands and they had to do that for them. Now, the helots were somewhat distinct from other ancient slaves because they were tied to the land that they came from. So if a helot came from there, you can't buy or sell a helot. You can't go into the slave market. If you want those helots, you have to go and buy the land. So it wasn't like the helots owned the land, but they were linked to the land. Like, you can't separate a helot from their agricultural field. The helots formed the majority of the population of Sparta and sort of the surrounding area, and whilst the Spartans were obviously much better warriors, that's kind of the whole thing, the Spartans needed some sort of method to keep the helots in check, because obviously, when you're treated very harshly, you're going to want to rebel, even if it's just no one wants to be a slave, right? So they wanted to rebel, and so the Spartans had to come up with various different methods to keep the helots in line, to keep them from rebelling, to keep them from going against them, just keep them in check, keep them being good slaves. And so the Spartans would treat the helots very harshly to instill fear. They would have public beatings, humiliations, executions. So you literally just have one day, you're a helot, you're working on your farm, which you've been doing for the past 20 years, and it's the same farm, and then just one day, all of your friends just get executed. Now, that might make you want to rebel more, but it would also probably leave you pretty terrified. And, the Spartans were very effective at preventing many rebellions. The Spartans also had basically a secret police force called the Cryptae, and their main goal was not to do with keeping the helots in line, but it was something they did. So you'd basically have these groups of secret police, Spartan secret police, who would just go around. Among other things, they would just kill the helots, just for the fun of it, really. It wasn't actually that they were just killing helots for the fun of it. It was more that they would kill any helots that they thought were planning a rebellion or were just being rebellious in general. And again, given that they were enslaved, that meant pretty much anyone was up for grabs. They would also kill any helot that seemed particularly strong or rebellious, because you want to keep your slaves strong, but you don't want them so strong that they'd rebel. So they take the fittest ones and execute them, and they're probably just the weakest ones as well. There's always a balance where you've got to go with keeping people beneath you. You've got to have them strong enough that they can work your field, but not so strong that they overpower you. Furthermore, every year Sparta would formally declare war on the helots, because eventually I suppose some people started to think perhaps there might be religious repercussions to this, going around killing these people all the time. And so by formally declaring war, that made it fair and square, because now you can go about killing them, and since we gave them warning, it's fair now. And it was also an opportunity for young Spartan men to just have a bit of fun, just chase after some slaves. The Spartans also used what I suppose you'd call psychological warfare, like psychological tactics to keep the helots in check. For example, they might allow a particular helot to accumulate some kind of wealth, to go somewhere, to finally feel that they're even free, perhaps, only for them to then have it stripped away from them, as in to have all their wealth gone or have all their family killed, just to show you think you can escape, but you're not going to. And this obviously led to a constant state of uncertainty and fear, alongside presumably brutal working conditions. Now, it wasn't just Sparta that did this. In Athens they had slaves too, except they probably had democratic rights. They probably had legal rights. I mean, legal rights is a massive overstatement, but I'm focusing mainly on Sparta just because of how much the slaves outnumbered the Spartans. I don't know what the actual numbers were, but there were far more helots than there were Spartans, and also because of what I'd call like psychological tactics that the Spartans employed to keep the helots in check. Obviously, there are also like more sensible things like restricting weapon ownership, but I think not many people would go, oh, that's a bit unfair, you're not letting your slaves up. I mean, obviously no one's going like thinking like slavery is fair and fun, but of all things that could be reasonable and unreasonable, not letting your slaves have weapons is fairly reasonable, I'd say. So basically what I've been telling you so far is that the Spartans kept the helots weak so they didn't revolt. Not so weak, again, that they can't work, but not so strong that they can actually rebel. And in a somewhat twisted way, this does actually make sense, because you don't want your slaves to revolt, you don't want them to rebel. And the thing is, this was thousands of years ago, this was, classical Greece, so sort of BC time period. In the modern world, they do much the same. The world is organised, it is designed in such a way to keep people weak, to keep them from rebelling. And I'll explain what in a second, but I just want you to keep in mind, as I talk about the next few things, that it feels like the world is orchestrated, it is designed, like I said, to keep, as if we are the helots and there is someone out there, which are the Spartans, keeping us under. Starting off with the education system, right? School, at least in the UK, begins at 4 or 5. Most people begins at 4, and if you go to preschool, it could be, 3. So you're in the education system very early on. And from there, it's like, that's when your brainwashing begins, right? That's when you first get told you have to be meek. You are told to sit down, cross your legs, be quiet, don't ask questions. And if you do ask questions, it's got to be stupid questions. Most schools will deny this, but creativity is purposefully stifled. It's not like, sometimes they have these team building exercises or creativity exercises. It's not actually about building creativity. Most schoolwork is just kind of mindless slop anyway. It's preparing you for the monotony of just an office job. Because realistically, most school work isn't even about learning. No, I've learned an awful lot from school. I intend to go on to higher education. I'm not saying school is worthless, but again, there is very much a sense in which school wants you to just kind of be kind of weak and submissive. You have to follow exactly what the teacher tells you. If you want to go to the toilet, you've got to put your hand up and ask. In what kind of society would you have to ask to basic needs, literally needs? And the thing is, it's not like a courtesy thing, it's not like you're asking to be polite. You can be refused, which is absurd, it's ridiculous. And yet, since it happens from such a young age, most people don't question the fact that they've got to put their hand up to go to the toilet. And like I said before, the main part of SORT is that you've got to follow instructions, you've got to use the correct method. Because even, let's say something like maths, right? Even if you do it in the wrong way, but get the correct answer, you've done it wrong. It's I said wrong way, it's not like it's a different way. There is a right way and a wrong way, and you've got to do it in the right way, or else, you lose. And like I said, you're told to sit still for 6-8 hours a day, don't say anything, be quiet, just don't do anything. And if you don't like that for some reason, you're diagnosed with ADHD, or you end up getting in trouble because you end up rebelling against it. School naturally tries to squash any kind of adventurous traits. You try to do something different, you're told that you're wrong. You go outside, you climb a tree or something, you do something naturally adventurous, and you get in trouble for it. And instead you're just given pointless work, which hardly classifies as work when it's mostly just fill in the blanks or just useless stuff. This is also why you girls tend to exceed more in school, because they're much better at kind of sitting still, being quiet, crossing their legs, and doing the kind of mindless, busy work that comes with school, and they're much less likely to rebel or try to break rules. I know this sounds a little bit peculiar, but I hope you can understand what I mean, where it feels like school from the very beginning, it is brainwashing you to be meek, to be quiet, to do what you're told, to just don't question a thing, just listen to the authorities, they know what's best, just never try to go off the beaten path, never try to do anything different, just do what they say. So from the very beginning, it's clear that the world is designed to keep you weak and submissive mentally. But it's not even just that. If you think about diet, right? Most people get their food from fast food chains. If you even just think about the prominence of big brands, they're everywhere. And for most people, they're the only option. Because the food tends to be cheaper and also familiar, it's just the natural choice. Because it's also why less well-off people tend to be less healthy, because, I don't know, let's say McDonald's, right? That's the cheapest option. And if you don't have time to cook because you're always working, or if you can't afford to buy ingredients, or if you can't afford to go and get decent food, you're trapped having to buy the same rubbish food over and over again. And given the prominence of these brands, they're everywhere, it's difficult to choose another choice. It's difficult to go somewhere else once you start there, because you know the food, you like it, and again, it's just the easier option. And whilst it's not being forced on anyone, it is very much difficult to choose to eat healthily. And keep in mind that doctors used to lie about things all the time. They were paid by like massive companies to say that sugar was good for you and that it was fat that was the problem. You know, fat makes you fat, which they knew was false, but they were paid to say otherwise. And so that was the prevailing narrative for a very long time. I mean, even I know I said a second ago that like most of the time it's a choice, like where you go to, but it's just like the choice is taken away from you. Like there are a huge amount of advertisements for like things that are just objectively bad for you, like health-wise. Like I'm thinking mostly to do with like poor food, but even if you think about like, you know, like bright and flashy vapes are. And actually going back to the whole advertisement thing, there's this part in Fahrenheit 451 where like the billboards over years have slowly been getting longer because people keep on driving faster on the motorways, and so, you know, the billboards need to be stretched longer so you can see. Actually not sure what I was going with that, but just the most advertised option, the easiest option, is the stuff that's bad for you, which is owned by these massive corporations who make money off selling you what is barely real food. And again, this is the easiest option for most people, and for a lot of people it is the only option they have. And then moving on to technology and social media. Even without the content, even without what you're actually being shown, think about like what social media companies want from you. Say you've got TikTok or Facebook or Instagram or even YouTube. They make money from adverts, right? Advertisements, and which are shown to you when you watch their platform. So ideally, for them, they want you to be on their platform for as long as possible. If they were to make an ideal customer, it would literally just be someone who sits on their phone all day watching their content and watching their adverts. Doesn't even matter if they click on the adverts, that's not the problem with the platform, that's with the advertisers. They want you to just sit there and watch and consume all day long. And since social media companies, they're run by incredibly intelligent people, they are very good at getting you to do that. And you know that's very apparent because there are a huge number of people who are addicted to various forms of social media nowadays. But given that they make their money, they make their profit from having you sit down and consume their content, they don't want you to do anything, they don't want you to go outside, they don't want you to actually have any experiences, they just want you to sit there and rot. And since they are so clever, they are very good at getting you to do that. And again, whilst this isn't necessarily intentional, it just happens to be that their ideal customer is someone who does nothing, who stays weak, because if they stay weak, then what are they going to do? They're just going to consume content all day. And that's regardless of the actual content, because, you know, if you are like sitting down, you know, you're at school or you're being yelled at, you're forced to be quiet, and you're sitting down, you've got your legs crossed, you're not saying anything, and you're being fed this food that's terrible for you, you know, at least you're watching some educational content, except most of the time you're not. There's an increasing prevalence of brain rot nowadays, which just infuriates me because people are fully aware that it's rotting their brain. Like, it's called brain rot. If you're willing to admit that you have watched brain rot before, you are fully aware that it's not good for you, and yet you just continue to watch it anyway because you're complacent, because you don't care. You know, I still can't wrap my head around the reason why anyone would choose to watch something which is actively rotting their brain. It's not like they're having they're not learning anything. You might cope and say, you know, I learned tons of things from all the shorts and TikToks I watch, and like that may be true in the first 5 seconds, but if you were to ask me, let's say you watch 10 shorts, right, because shorts are, okay, no, you watch 60 shorts, right, because shorts are a minute long each. I don't know about other platforms, right, on YouTube, and you take an hour, right, which realistically you wouldn't do, because you probably watch 600 shorts, because you only watch them for a few seconds, but you watch those 10 shorts, or 60 shorts, you don't remember the first one, you don't remember the third one, you don't remember the 59th one, you might remember the 60th one because you just watched it. You don't actually remember anything you watch, you're not learning anything from it. And even if you like get rid of brain rot and things which is just literally nothing, most of the time you're actively being fed false information or just things that are like immoral, I suppose. I'm not just like, you're being encouraged to rot there, and when you are rotting there, you're being shown things which are not good for you, which are objectively leading to worse mental health, to worse morality, just worse people, I suppose. What's also more and more prevalent nowadays is video games, and actually I can't speak too much about this because the only video game I've actually really played is Minecraft, but video games, they want the exact same thing from you as social media, because originally, when you have a video game, it's worth 30 quid, I don't know. You buy the video game, and that is that. Like, you buy it and you own it, and at that point in time, they probably don't care how much you play. But nowadays, because you've got DLCs and battle passes and subscriptions, they, again, just like social media, they want you to be on there as long as possible. And the way they do that, which is actually very similar to social media, is they offer you something which you don't have in real life. They offer you adventure or brotherhood or excitement or whatever. In the same way that social media offers you friends when you have no friends, because you can have your 50 Facebook, probably like you have your 5,000 Facebook friends, and like when it's your birthday, you get a bunch of people saying like, "Haps, bro." I don't know if people do that on Facebook, but in the same way that social media offers you friendship and connection, video games will offer you things which you don't have in life. Like I said, adventure, and it doesn't count as adventure when it's in like a virtual world. If you explore a virtual world, you're not exploring anywhere. Like it's already been predetermined. Even if it's like Minecraft, which is randomly generated, it's not exploring when it's not real. It's not adventure when it's not real. There's something a YouTuber said called Luke Smith about potatoes.
But when it comes down to it, the difference between Minecraft potatoes and real life potatoes is potatoes. There are going to be potatoes that come out of that, not in Minecraft.
Minecraft potatoes aren't potatoes in the same way that fake adventure isn't real adventure. Again, you might be thinking, what does this have to do with slaves? Like, what's the connection between this? And basically what I'm trying to get at is, so far, from what I've described, with the school brainwashing you to be meek, and it is, whether or not intentionally or not, and social media companies keeping you weak, keeping that hooked to their platforms, you never do anything, again, whether or not that's just because it's good for business or for something else, and again, how video games, again, they take the things which you can't get in real life, and they offer a substitute, which feels like the real thing, but isn't, because Minecraft potatoes look like potatoes, but they're not real potatoes, which means you don't even want to have the real thing, because now you can get the fake thing so much more easier. Again, I was going to say you've never achieved anything in a video game, but like you get given these achievements, which aren't real achievements, also like, well done, which gives you a sense of accomplishment, but once again, you've accomplished nothing. Anyway, it very much feels like the world is orchestrated in such a way to keep you weak, in much the same, like not in the same way as the Spartans did. It's much more subtle than that, and that it's much more subliminal. You know the scene in They Live, where like the guy's got the sunglasses. I think that's to do with aliens rather than government or whatever. But he's got the sunglasses, take them on and off, and like when he puts them on, it says like obey or consume, and when he takes them off, like it's just like a random advert. It's not like everything's just going around saying obey, consume, do what we say, get married, reproduce. I can't remember what the other ones are, but there are Spartans out there which are keeping us, the helots, weak. For some reason. Now, you don't get big signs that say, be weak, just do what we say. But again, it feels like we are encouraged to do the behaviours that lead towards that. You're encouraged to sit still, be quiet, legs crossed, do what we tell you. You're encouraged to just eat the food that's bad for you. Like I said, like adverts just, like, when was the last time you actually saw like an advert for actually healthy food? I mean, maybe I've got AdBlock on literally everything I use, so I don't know. But like, when was the last time that you actually saw something that like was encouraging you to actually do something productive? Like, for most people, that's probably never, unless you live in a very niche corner of the internet, or if you just go outside very frequently, then maybe you will. But for most of the time, it's not. At least to me, in my schizo rants, it feels very much like this is planned. And it might not be, I'll get to this part later, but it feels like the world is orchestrated to keep you weak, to keep you from rebelling. It's not just like that you're made to be meek in school, it's that you're made to be not rebellious. It's not that you're just made to rot on your phone, it's made to rot on your phone so that you don't do things in real life. You get the adventure and the sense of accomplishment and like fighting the baddies. Like you fight the baddies in the video game, which means in real life you no longer have a desire to fight the bad guys because you've already done it. You already get the sense of accomplishment, the sense of friendship, everything from the virtual world, which means you don't have to do anything in the real world. And I think part of this is because we are the helots, right? I'm a helot, you're a helot. This is a weird metaphor, I realise. We massively outnumber. Like, the general population, like, the rest of the world massively outnumbers the billionaires who run the big tech corporations, like, I don't know, Google or Meta, Microsoft, I don't know. We massively outnumber, like, all the, like, governments. Like, it literally just, like, however many members of the UK government, there's only, like, I don't know, like, a couple hundred MPs, right? Like, we could take them. And that's like, like not even taking into account like, ooh, is there a deep state government? Is there people beneath? Like literally, if you take everyone in charge, like everyone in charge compared to everyone else, massive difference, right? And even if you've got nuclear bombs, you can't stop 8 billion people. Like, what are you going to do? Nuke the entire world? And so, just like the helots and the Spartans, there is a group of people. And this might just be coincidence. There's a group of people who want to keep everyone weak, to prevent them from rebelling. Because if you looked around and saw the state of our world, saw how bad things is, saw, you know, the inequality, I don't know, climate change, so like the way the governments, like at least the UK government has like treated people historically, and especially, no, actually, more I look into American government, like, if you were to all look at that, and I'm sure there's more which we don't know about, if you were to look at all of that, there is a sense in which you would want to rebel, and so they've got to distract us, they've got to keep us weak so that we don't rebel. The problem is though, most people are complacent, they don't care about the being weak, and the thing is, if you try to talk about this, you sound schizo. Guys, the government, the Matrix, the powers that be, they're putting chemicals in your food, they're putting fluoride in your tap water, except they are. At least about the fluoride bar. At least the UK government has been putting fluoride, that's I think an anion of fluorine, which isn't particularly good for you, in our tap water for the past however many years, in the name of oral hygiene and like preventing tooth decay, except it's obviously not working because, like, look at the state of our nation's teeth. And even if it did work, don't you think it's rather peculiar that we get no control over chemicals which are added to our water? And I know I just kind of stepped onto like the water fluoridization thing. And it's not like the issue is entirely uncontentious anyway. Dean Burke, who's an American biochemist and cancer researcher, called water fluoridization mass murder on a grand scale, which is actually a bit of a tautology because mass murder on a grand scale, but still, like, it's not like everyone thinks, you know, like adding fluoride to our water is a good thing. And like I said, even if there wasn't an issue with like just adding a teeny weeny bit of fluoride to our water, don't you think it's weird that we get no control? And I kind of jumped onto the water fluoridization thing, but again, you sound really insane when you talk about this. You sound like, oh no, like, school's brainwashing you to be weak though, like the government, they want you to be weak, and yet if you actually look, it does. I'm trying not to sound like this is some grand conspiracy, because I don't want it to be. This isn't me saying, oh, like, there's a conspiracy. It's not like saying, like, oh, like, the world, they're out to get you. No, because I don't necessarily think that's the case. I don't think there's, like one single person or group who's, like, saying, okay, TikTok, okay, you're gonna keep them weak this way. Video games, you're gonna keep them this weak that way. And, like, we're gonna, like, advertise these foods so that they keep it. I don't think it's like that. I think it's more sinister than that. Perhaps not more sinister as an intention, but I think this is mainly just a product of laziness in the education system and greed from corporations, which is just so bad, which it appears to be. So, and, you know, actually, maybe this is on purpose. Maybe, like, everyone is collaborating together. What I think is more realistic is just that YouTube, TikTok, social media companies just want to make money off you, and it's best to keep you submissive if they want to do that. And just the education system just wants to make good workers, just wants to make good docile workers, which tend to not be rebellious because then they follow their boss's orders. Now, there's one more link I want to make between slavery and Greeks and the modern world, and that's to do with the degradation of values and morals and ethics, which is becoming, like I said, more and more prevalent nowadays. There's a quote from Romans, which I'm going to read out. But now, being made free from sin and having become servants of God, you have your fruit of sanctification and the result of eternal life. So that's from Romans 6:22, and it's essentially hinting at this broader concept in Christianity. And I promise this isn't all about Christianity. I'll get to my main point in a second, in which you can either be a slave to sin or a slave to Christ. And, you know, you can take the religiositiness out of that. You can say you can either be a slave to your vices or you can be a slave to a greater moral good. In fact, there's even something like Eliud Kipchoge, you know, the marathon runner, the one who kind of broke the 2-hour marathon but didn't because it wasn't official. Like, only the disciplined ones are free in life, because the undisciplined ones, they're a slave to their mood and passions. So you have these two options, a slave to morality, to Christ, or a slave to vices and sin and bad stuff. Except these are two very different and unequal masters, because for every vice you have, for everything that you have to do, that's another master, right? If you're addicted to alcohol, that's one thing. Cigarettes, another thing. Your phone, another thing. If you just always get angry with people, that's another thing. Each vice you have is a separate master. I mean, you'll see people addicted to Snapchat, you know, where they've got streaks where you've got to send someone a photo every day. And after, like, I don't know, a couple of weeks maybe, it gets to a point where you have to send them a picture. You have to send them a photo every day, or else, because, you know, your stupid number disappears. And, like, it begins to take control of you. And, you know, this isn't just my schizo rambling. This is also, you know, like, backed up with science and evidence. Like, once you get addicted to something, it's incredibly difficult to stop. And it's not just substance addiction. You can become addicted to actions and behaviours. I mean, even in a sense, the way you speak is almost an addiction, because once you get used to speaking in a certain way, you stay speaking like that. People who are addicted to coffee need their coffee before they wake up. People who vape just need one more toke of the vape. The more vices, the more addictions you have, the less free you are. The more things you're addicted to, the less free you are. There's a sense in which people just like claim that religion is slavery, right? Because there's these hundreds of rules which you have to follow. Actually, not really true. I mean, you can sort of, on a very surface level, I suppose that's true. But it's more so that, again, the more vices you have, the more things that you're addicted to, the less free you are. Because once you're addicted to your phone, that means you've got to send your stupid photos. You've got to, scroll on TikTok. Once you're addicted to coffee, you've got to have it before you can talk to anyone in the morning. You've got to. If you get addicted to alcohol, you just need something. But once you get addicted to cigarettes, you have to. The more things you have to do, the less free you are. Because you've got to do this and this and this and this. And you might think you chose to, because originally, of course, you chose to do so. But it becomes a point when you no longer have a choice. And that's when you become a slave to sin, a slave to your vices, a slave to your moods and passions. Every vice you have, that's another thing that's weighing you down, that's slowing you down, that's keeping you weak. And things, what do we find nowadays? What do we find in our modern world? We find a society that facilitates these kind of addictions. Like I said before with smoking, like smoking used to be promoted. And of course, that's just because they genuinely thought it was healthy, and we know better now. That's kind of flipped on its head. But even like vapes, right? They're basically advertised to children. They're not actually, because they're not legally allowed to, but like the bright colours and the funny smells, like taste like sweets, right? Or social media. Again, it's not destructive in the sense it's not as bad as like a public humiliation or an execution. But actually that's not true. I mean, cancel culture, that's equivalent to a public humiliation. And exactly. Come to think of it, I didn't mention cancel culture. Cancel culture will like literally prevent you from expressing your beliefs because you're worried that you'll get in trouble for it, because you're worried that you'll be publicly humiliated. That's another thing that's keeping you complacent, keeping you weak, because you're too scared. You're too scared to speak out against something, against the narrative, against anything, because you're worried that you'll get cancelled, that you'll lose your job, that you'll lose everything. I mean, like, I also didn't mention like mass media. Again, it's controlling the narrative, and if you go against the official narrative, against like even with things that may even be factual, or just think like, that doesn't quite sound right, you'll have your entire life ruined. And so what do we find in this modern era then? We find a society that doesn't allow for morality. It prevents morality, it prevents ethics, it prevents discipline, it doesn't facilitate any of these things. We don't even have truth anymore. We've got to have my truth, your truth. We can't be a universal our truth. It can't be this is. It's like, oh, well, that's your opinion. Like, what happens is things just existing? And like I've tried to say many times before, this isn't supposed to be a conspiracy theory. This isn't like I'm saying, the one world government is, making us weak so we don't rise up. But there is a sense in which I feel, in which like all these things, including like the fast food companies and the social media companies and the government and the education system, it's all not conspiring together, but perhaps working together unwittingly to keep people weak, to prevent them from being who they're supposed to be. Because you can't, this sounds like it's like fulfilling your potential, but literally you can't be who you were meant to be if you spend all your time on your phone. You can't go out and develop and learn if all you're developing and learning is in video games. You can't get anywhere. And again, we are the helots. We outnumber any social media company, like their executives. I mean, literally. Even if it was just like 10 people, like 10 to 1, like how many billionaires in the world? Like a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand billionaires compared to the rest of the world. And if everyone was able to see what was going on, and occasionally everyone does see, it leads to riots, it leads to protest, and so what do they have to do? Whether or not they're doing it together, they have to keep us weak. And again, it could just be for profit, it could just be that weak people are easier to make money from. I genuinely don't know, but I would like to leave you with a quote from an Italian Freemason, and the Freemasons still exist, by the way. We corrupt in order to rule. Oh, well, thank you for watching. This video was kind of back in line with what I was originally making. I made the first video while I was sitting down it's actually in the same room, sitting down on the chair over there, and then I was going like, I didn't really know what to say, and then I kind of messed that up by having two completely different videos, which were not at all in the same style and probably not what I'll be making. And, I reckon when I look back at this, I'll just see 30 odd minutes of just skits or rambling. But hopefully if anyone's made it this far, found it interesting, the setup's got improved. I figured that I used to have like the shutter speed on the camera at about 800, which is ridiculous. You don't need it higher than 25 for video, so there's more light in the room. I managed to get the aperture change, which means I'm less in focus, but again more light. Although I cracked my lens, so I've actually got to have the aperture. I should high or low, like the f-stop number is low. And you know, this isn't actually a microphone, this is a webcam, but the microphone is marginally better than the one in the camera, and it means that I don't have to stand 2 feet away. So yeah, I don't know what this video will look like afterwards. I have no idea how much I'm going to edit it. I might just leave it as is and just, you know, you just have to suffer with me looking at the camera for a while, or you know, it might be ridiculously over edited. But yeah, I suppose I'll put this in summary again. Actually, now. Yeah. Thank you for watching, I guess.